Hey guys, welcome back to my shop. My name is Marc LeBlanc. Today I'm going to be tackling a brand new project that is going to prove to have its own set of challenges, quite a few challenges, and it's reproducing this Moroccan table. This table belongs to a couple that we know, good friends of ours. They brought it over to my house once to get it fixed. A couple of the joints had been unglued and the table was a little bit out of square. Well, I got the gluings done, I got the squareness a little bit sorted out, but not enough. You'll notice it's still wobbly right now. There's not much I can do. Some of the joints on the panels on the side are not square themselves. So the table suffered through, its own existence, and right now that's the best that I can do, is just have it a little bit, a little wobbly like this. Reason I want to tackle this project is there's a number of challenges in here that are really interesting. The top of the table, and I'll show you this in a second, is an octagon, and it's got a number of pieces. There's a center piece, which is a flat panel, and around it there's a number of perimeter pieces with a little bit of not turning but routing on the side. So the first challenge is not so much cutting the panel, the octagon. I think that's going to be relatively easy. I've seen some tips and tricks on YouTube that are actually quite elegant. The challenge actually is going to be, how do we glue all these pieces together? How do I cut the perimeter pieces to the right length, make that reproducible, make it square, like all those little things. The gluing up is going to be fascinating. So that's the first challenge, and that's what I'm going to tackle on day one. The second challenge is going to be to turn the legs. I think that'll be relatively easy. These legs are simple, they're elegant though, and I like the overall shape. You'll notice that there's turnings in the center, so that has to be considered as well. I don't think that'll be too complicated, but we'll have to contend with that. In the center, between two legs, you've got a stub here. I think that'll be relatively easy to do with a little bit of a turning on the bottom. The big challenge is going to be these side panels, and how do we glue them up? Do I taper the top of the leg so that it gives me the right angle? Do I taper the inlay piece? How do I glue them? How do I join everything? It's going to be some, I got to think this one through a little bit, because it's certainly got some challenges. Overall, what I really like about this table is its look, its elegance. It really speaks, this comes from Northern Africa, comes from Morocco. That's what it tells me right away. And I really like the shape. I'd like to make one. So let's give it a shot. So here's a closer look at the top. You'll notice, as I mentioned, this is an octagon shape. The total width of the table is slightly under 16 inches. If I look at the millimeter gauge, it's exactly 40. So the top, let's say this thing was made, not surprisingly, in the metric system, it is exactly 40 millimeters, or 40 centimeters wide, by the way, actually. So as I mentioned, there's an inner piece. The grain is going in this direction. So it's probably a couple of panels that have been glued up together. It's a little tough to see with the stain. The panel itself, side to side, is measuring it right now. If I use again the metric system, it is exactly 32 millimeters, and in inches it's slightly over 12 1/4. The perimeter pieces are all cut to make all these angles, and they are, let me just measure that quickly, it is 1 3/4 or 4.5 centimeters wide. Overall pretty simple. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to glue up a couple of panels, I'm going to cut the octagon shape, and then that will give me the precise measurement that I need for these pieces, and then I'm going to start cutting the angles properly. I know the angles have to be 22.5 degrees, so that will be the challenge, is to find the exact good length and then glue them all together. I don't know how I'm going to glue them. Is it going to be biscuits? Maybe. We'll see. We'll play it by ear. All right, let's give it a shot. Let's start. All right, so first step is to cut the boards for the top. get them squared away. Then put them on the joiner to get a nice clean edge and ready for glue up. I'm going to be using biscuits to join these two boards, get them nice and straight. Finally, time for some preliminary assembly. Put lots of glue, especially in the biscuit holes and on the edges. Clamp everything up and we'll be good to go. For clamping, I'll be using a couple of pipe clamps and also put some boards along the linear axis in order to prevent any cupping. While my first glue up is curing, I'm going to take another board and I'm going to start cutting what will eventually become the strips on the edges. Once my top boards are cured, I'm going to use my table saw sled to square off the piece. Now that my top piece is square, I'm going to use a straight edge to line up the diagonals and figure out where we're going to be making the cuts to make the octagon. In order to do that, I'm just going to use a simple ruler and measure the shortest point between the center point and between the edge. That distance, I'm going to apply that or measure that off on each of the diagonals. Using a speed square, I'm going to put a 45-degree line on that mark, and that's going to give me indication as to where we're going to be making our cuts for the octagon. So the best way I found to cut the octagon was to use a miter sled, and I glued a stop block so that it would have the exact same distance all the time. After every cut, I took my ruler and made sure that the length of the cut matched what I was expecting to make a perfect octagon. And now it's time to make the edge. So I'm cutting a 22.5-degree angle on one of the pieces to begin with. Then I'm going to take my octagon and I will do a rough measurement of where I expect the edge piece to be. And what I'll do then is I'll do a succession of cuts, always cutting proud the first time, just so that I get close eventually to the line that I'm expecting. Here I'm clamping down my piece and making very, very small cuts in order to get right to where I want it to be. Now that I've got my piece done, what I've done is taken a sacrificial piece, clamped that down to the right length, and now it's just a question of rinse and repeat and cut 8 pieces to the same length. It's finally time for some assembly. Just notice on the octagon shape itself, the centerpiece, that I put this very small decorative detail with my table saw. Just cut a 1/16 of an inch deep, just to give a little bit of a groove effect. Finally, I decided to use only glue, and the big challenge here was to find an elegant way to clamp everything down. Bend clamp did the trick, and it worked perfectly well. Once the glue had cured, I just gave it a light sanding before continuing, and the next step was just to use my router and give it a nice edge detail along all sides. So there you have it. This takes care of part 1 in this series to build a Moroccan table. The top is now completed. I've just sanded it down to 220 grit. It looks great. It looks really as good as I could have hoped. In part 2, what I'm going to show you is how I turned these legs and started to build the base of the table. See you then.